Hello, 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 hello. Testing, testing. How are we doing, people? Today is the Sunday, the 2nd August 2026. Hey, how many years are those, people? I told you 2026. Max 25 years of my being in the diaspora. Those who want to know where I am right now, I'm miles away, 6,000 miles. If you board the plane, they show you the map of your destination, final destination, and they work it on the miles and all those things, whatever altitude and everything. I was a frequent traveler. I know what I'm talking about here, people. Anyway, it's about time and place. Distance and time. Distance and time equals speed. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. Physics. I told you I was supposed to do sciences. A levels. PCB combination, physics, chemistry, and biology. I did it for one term, and then I moved to the arts. Right. I was paying my own tuition fees, so I had to make my own decisions. My mom had stopped paying for me school fees from senior 4 when they suspended me from school to return and do the exams, senior 4. UNEB. Uganda National Examination Board exams. Anyone has to do those exams if you study. Even if you're in prison anywhere, you have to do your exams. Those who don't know. So, today we have a long story. There are so many gaps. So many gaps. Kegus. We know so much about your mom. We love her. Rest in peace. My mom was loved by everybody. Oh, Mrs. Knight Victoria Chanda, aka Mariam Nasanga. My mom was a Muslim. There was a very big battle between the Chibuli Muslim before it became the Supreme Council and everything. In fact, all that quagmire drew a lot of attention. Eventually, the government of the day, Idi Amin, would separate Chibuli and create Old Kampala. Biava kumama wange. More or less. The drama was that she was changing from Muslim, or she was converting to Christianity. At Namirembe. And she had to study a small, or is it a baptism, whatever. There's things, the sacrament, whatever. It drew the attention of the day. 1972. I'm not born yet. The drama begins. Okay. Those who don't know Chibuli Mosque, that is the foundation of the Islamic religion. Islam is pretty much centered around Chibuli. Plus, of course, if you look at the other religions, the Protestants, Catholics, other denominations, as you may know. So 1972, when my dad is getting married, it was whirlwind romance. You know what I mean? And so many things were at play. He is a young billionaire with very strong ties to the church. The church, you know how my dad was raised in the seminary. When my dad was born, you know this already, he was taken away from my grandmother by the missionaries and raised the formative years, the early years, probably up to about 6, 7. And then when my grandmother met another man, she went with my dad. mwana mujja na nyina. So those are the kind of things people, when they ask me, why was your dad very religious? Why did he build so many churches? That is the foundation. And that foundation would lay the groundwork for everything that would come later on in his life. Do you get what I mean, people? I want to give you a perfect storm. You know, a perfect storm gathers properly. And then when it hits, it really does the damage. We've had these hurricanes and everything. You know what a hurricane is, people? That is the beginning. And you know already how my mom and my dad met. You know what I mean? I'll show you the pictures of the houses my dad was building. 3 houses, they were empty. So they moved in to one of the houses, which later would become her marital home. A chebando. There were 3 houses in one. Tiles and everything, very, very bungalow, everything, very beautiful. 1972, Mukalazi construction. Mukalazi, if you know Mukalazi technical, is the one who built those houses. That's how he got introduced into construction during the later years of Idi Amin. He was one of the biggest. Mukalazi, Bukoto, yali twamitanga Uncle Mukalazi. So those are the circles of my dad. Anyway, my mom, at the age of 16, tender age, she marries into wealth, extreme wealth. Extreme wealth. She's young, she's a teenager. My dad is only 24. Now, those who asked me about my dad, how he made a win, they must have fallen into what I call a windfall during the takeover or the overthrow of Dr. Milton Obote, who was the president at the time. He was in Singapore attending a Commonwealth conference, accompanied by my dad's personal friend, Mr. Henry Chamber, Principal Private Secretary to the President. Later on, when he came back, he would, Idi Amin gave him a post in the government and all that. But he already had ties, he had connections that I'm talking about, the billionaire elites, Bamzeiba, for our dads, you know. So that begins the foundation of my mom. At 16, 17, she's driving a new car, a Datsun, Uganda Motors Corporation. That's where my dad bought her first car. 16, 17, Chevando. There were a fleet of cars at home, I remember, growing up during the 70s. But my mom would return back to school. Those who want to know, my mom was in senior 2, senior 3, Namirembe Senior Secondary. Namirembe Senior Secondary School. I'm going to check out that school and see if it is still there. That's where my mom went. That's where she did her early secondary, but she did not complete because she began family life. But she would return back to study in the 70s, 77, 78, 79. And I used to travel with her, Uganda Airlines, every week, flying back and forth. We had a house in Kenya, Kileleshwa, very affluent part of Kenya. But all these things were coming together at the time because we had the East African community. East African community, remember that? Confederation of 3 countries, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. They were together in a confederation. Yes, East African community. So there were a lot of privileges for those who were in the right places, and being the fact that my dad was a billionaire. Having worked previously as a chief principal financial auditor, West Buganda, Mango Growers Cooperative Union. Very, very huge cooperative at the time. And he was very instrumental in dividing it into two. Then they had East Mango, and they had West Mango. And they would build their HQ along Ginger Road. Victoria University, where that building, that was the HQ. It was built by my dad. While he led the construction of that building. Do you know what I mean? So you can see the amount of money he was dealing with. And, you know, you just imagine that. Eh? And he would retire in 1972 to start business. So he goes into coffee business, setting up. His first business, my dad, was called Spear Touring, together with Gordon Wavamuno. Spear Touring and Travel. So you see where I'm coming from. Then later they would go their own ways. So if you see Spear Motors today, it began in the 70s as a tour agency. The Africans were beginning to travel, the affluent, the elite, and everything. There was money being made. Remember, the Asians had been expelled now. So there was a transfer of, you know, the blacks were taking over and everything. So when my dad goes into business, which would eventually be very, very successful, Zinalaba, at the back to back, we're talking of now 76, 77, 78, they are living their happy life, you know, starting family and all that. So I'm bringing you up to speed, I'm jumping. So by 1978, 79, things begin to change. There had been a lot of unrest in the country. People were not happy, people were disgruntled, and there was this pressure from other circles to return back Obote. He had left a lot of elements in the system. That is too political. Now if I go into politics, I would leave with the conversation, because I want to give you the full picture of the life we were living. And those who knew how privileged, you know, that life of the elites post-independence in Uganda. So by 79, Uganda wages a war against Tanzania that would lead to the downfall and overthrow of the sitting president, Idi Amin. Idi Amin was a friend of my dad. It was just, I cannot deny that. I cannot say it was anything other than that. Of course, they were the young elite. But of course, there were many other things going on. Other than that, being that they were in business with the, I would give you names, but there are so many names. Baba itanga mafuta mingi. If anybody had been labeled mafuta mingi, you knew those were the people, the who is who, the elites. Kampala Club. But what is interesting, let me tell you this, is that the post-colonial outfit was embraced by those who came into the system. How? Because if you look at Nakasero, if you look at Kololo, if you look at Buko, it was an outfit. Now, if you look at the pictures of my dad's wedding in 1972, you will see Bogolobi flats. Ngabatan so zizimba. 1972. There are people who have contested into Obote yali abizimba. Uganda Commercial Bank, Obote yajizimba. Communication House, maybe there bingi nnyo. Those were the grandiose projects. Bazimbanga ebintu bingi nnyo. Kati people would say nti amini nakola no. Ekyo kyo nkinako facts. Wanga babyogeranga n'awaka. Oba if you look at opposite Uganda Railway, those buildings there, you would know what was going on in the country. So by 1980, tukomyewo okuva Kenya. we had skipped town, because that's what I always say. So we skipped town. Tulibana Batomi, I was young, you know that. I remember Saba, Summit View, Kololo. Because there was an airstrip there, there's even what they call a detach. There was a detachment camp. Nabidabanga. And when we left for Nairobi, that is where we boarded the Fokker Friendship. There were planes that used to land similar to Cessna, but these were quite big. Airstrip nene nyo mutemuchimanyi. You don't know that airstrip of Kololo. There was also another airstrip. Mulaba Old Kampala. Now waliwo airstrip. People don't know these things. You don't know these things. There was an airstrip, Old Kampala. Kurusoza waggulu awo. Fort Lugard, whatever. But anyway, we were in Kenya for about 6 months. Then we would return. Katinagalamba wembozi ya mama wange. She's finished her studies at the prestigious East African Civil Service College. It was part of the now defunct East African Union, East African whatever, Unity, EAU, East African Unity. It had various names. They used to call it various names. If you go back in the history. And if you want to understand what I'm talking about, much of their other things, to join the civil service, you had to go to that institute or that college. In Tanzania, you would work in Kenya, you wanted to do law, you went to Dar es Salaam, you wanted to do medicine, you went to Uganda, school of, if you look at the School of Medicine at the university, it's fully fledged. It's not even anywhere in East Africa. Mulago Medical School. That's what I'm talking about. That's the picture I'm giving you. How things were set up at the time. So she finishes her studies in secretarial and administration. So that meant she could become a company secretary. And Obote now returns Nyamurunga in Bushenya. I remember that excitement. Yeah, I remember I was a kid. Because remember my dad had been a UPC youth winger. Uganda People's Congress. In the 60s, that is like the rich guys. So you have people like Paulo Mwanga, Uncle Paul, and a lot of other friends. Uncle Kasim Chuano Kaba. Now, I have no connection in your mind, but my mom is going to come to the forefront to pretty much work in the corporate for the first time. And it wasn't about going in, it was just a phone call, maybe. Uncle Rogers Mukasa, a personal friend of my dad who was instrumental in founding, when you found or starting something. Coffee Marketing Board, CMB. Remember, my dad had a background in business, a background in agriculture. And he was a stage or a step ahead. So he was able to guide Roger Mukasa. And work out the template ya Coffee Marketing Board, ne Coffee Development Authority, it is my dad, Chanda. In the 70s, he was the biggest one of the biggest, or say the biggest coffee. Zinalaba General Coffee Merchandise. Ngaba exporting a paka Kenya container. Zemwanya. And there was the coffee boom, remember, in the 70s. So there was a lot of money to be made. Kati amini yagezako controlling ekintu ekyo. Emwanyi yakase, smuggling and all that. Emwanyi nga efuna kiralu abantu ne bagaggawala kati amini couldn't control the rich people. Now, of course, Charlie Munebila, of course, you had the things against the government, Fronasa Mojimani. You know how Fronasa started? That is President Museveni. It was his outfit. Fronasa, Tandikirawa, Biari, Motemubimani, Biari Mubani, Tugen Doctor Kubino, Kikos Malone, Moshi. Like, in the end, if you see the benefactors, a story or it a joke, how he was rewarded with the Coffee Marketing Board and the ramifications of that. The chicken of 81 to 86 or 170, be named to be Abu Gaga. Teviri multi politics, Murania, things don't work like that. November stakeholders. Hadi 1981 people. My mom joins Uganda Development Corporation. It was a very huge outfit of the government. I think it was based on the socialist things, Ebiali Common Man's Charter. It was in everything. And then they would set up parastatals, they would set up all this Uganda this, Uganda that, Uganda this, Uganda hatcheries. So my mom was in the hatchery division, 1st Street in Australia. Baline Roja Mukasa, Coffee Marketing Board. Coffee Marketing Board. My dad is carrying on with this business. Kakachoro. Of course, my dad was rewarded. He got a lot of things from Obote. Yafuna Pep Scholar, Crown Cox Division. My dad was an industrialist. Arineba Muruana, ship toothbrush, and all those Uganda batteries. Which means Uganda batteries, the government. These things, guys, my mom is thrown in the deep end. At the deep end meant she was dealing with very, very huge budgets. Mugamba Anita Mogu nti adazanyira mu parliament. That is nothing. That is nothing. You government have said. Oh! And they launch the hatchery division, they launch enkuke enzungu maite muzidi Uganda. Mama wange bebazirete Uganda. Bakusainize a contract n'abadachi. They were shipping in the same template they used with the Uganda Ranchers scheme. Now they are using the same template to launch the hatcheries. Uganda nafe tukole enkuke enzungu rote cereal nazibagambe enkuke ezo. Then the pilot scheme was in Duterte. So my mom, as young as she was at that time in her life, Aina Mercedes-Benz executive company secretary, she just signs Katoro go on the dealership. Erinani Negodoni Yalita Benz is our government official supplier. I do get what I'm talking. If you connect the dots and the circles, all about the sphere of influence, the elites, the educated people, post-independence. But this whole thing had been designed by Obote. Common conference say yali erugogo 69 attempted assassination. bonna abaana abo bonna bamuzeeyi baffe bebaddawo okuvuga ekintu. So the 80s, 81, 82, 83, 84, up to 85, my mom is working in Uganda Development Corporation. Monday to Friday, she was at Nkrumah, head office. Nga waliwo ne Rosette dry cleaners. And then, I think they had set up something as well. Spring Valley Farms and Hatcheries Division. Oba yali yani, oba yali ya Roger Mukasa, oba yali yani sijjukira. Nebina byali wamu. Very big building. Oba yali nga yena contract, whatever. I don't understand. I was a kid. But I remember going to the offices there every evening. They used to pick me up from school. The driver. At people used to ask me, "Tiake gusibak nayanda mu Benz at Buganda Road." Behavior. Then my sisters would be taken home. Then me, I would come home with my mom or my dad, meeting one day, Lord Ziba, whatever, together, Colorado, together, Kampala Club. It was always a chaotic setup at home. Sometimes in Sulamba Somesa, Buganda Road, I used to stay with the teachers sometimes. I remember Mrs. Mwanja, Mr. Kahuma, Mr. Bwenje, and now in the staff quarters. And I would sleep over, come back the next day. That's why I told you the earlier discussion that my family, my dad and my mom, they were very friendly with the teachers at Buganda Road. Ngabafayo nyonyo, kagumba. We used to bring them chicken, we used to bring them whatever, milk. We had a farm at home. Chebando mixed farm. That is the 80s. And that is the life we were living in Chebando. Very, very privileged, very, very exclusive. In the morning, the gates open, people passing by, looking in, the cars are moving out, 1, 2, 3. Again, again, whatever, combi, everything. It was always a very busy beehive, whatever. Our cousins, our servants, very busy household. And my mom was young. Very by then she was 22, 23. But she was managing. In-laws, family, people staying behind the house. So the whole place was, but the main house was always very exclusive. In Nyumba Nene. That is how my mom structured the home environment. Engoye zivudde nizize byani byonna shopping byani byonna all that kind of thing. Tugenda mu drapers byani byonna, weekend Nakasero. Weekend we used to shop at we would all be taken Nakasero market. Kati mumugiraba nti kifulukwa Nakasero marketing out ogulawo kintu nga tolina mu ssente bakabagagga bokaboka. Nakasero market, it was for the colonial. Abazungu bagulanga mu Nakasero. Era bajjanga weekend ne baboyi omukyala ng'atambula ne baboyi be bakutte ebikapu. And that is the same template that was adopted by the Africans. It was Mercedes Benz wali, then the combi. Enkota z'amateka zigenda mu kombi byani byonna nyama byani tudda mu Benz nga tweyongerayo the combi. I mean a VW Volkswagen combi. It was like a camper van. So by 1985, are you with me? Government ekyuka. Obote is overthrown by the army. General Tito Okello. That would begin the downward spiral. Not its patronage. You know what patronage is? Mbamuliku, subsidies, tax exemptions. So my dad's business took a hit. And by 86, when the new regime takes over, Museveni gwengamba, Museveni n'olutalo lusinaba. I haven't given you the full story of the 1981-86 war. Ne shenanigans byonna ebyalimu byani byonna byonna. What was there to lose, what was there to gain, and you know the benefactors, the stakeholders, byali biwanvu. Lwaki olutalo lwali mu luweero byani byonna biwanvu. So my mom, we had fallen victim to a lot of atrocities during the war, and even overthrow. They ransacked our house, they burnt our house in Chevando, they killed people in our compound. There was a lot of mess in Chevando. My mom had begun building a house, Kakatingana Babulia Dream House. The Dream House, Upper Mawanda Road, Kalina double-storied house. And she had her reasons. I remember we were coming from a party one evening. I was a kid, P4, P5, yeah. And my mom was in so much money. And I think she was asking my dad and blah, blah, blah about building another house. And then we have 3 houses. Why do you want another? There was a bit, when I was a kid, you listen. But my mom already bought the land. She had already bought the land. We moved up Amanda Road opposite the police post. Nabagamba. It was a footpath. That road was leveled and called Upper Mawanda Road by my mom. We have Mawanda Road, the main road which goes up to Kaleerwe. So that road was leading straight to our house. That's the first house there. Then Mwarabu Nazimba, there was an Arab guy who built opposite us, and people built up the place later on to join the road with the tarmac road up in Doctor's Village, where Dr. Mbide never Ian Jebabera Paka or Gurweri. So you get what I'm talking about. So they began building the house, double-storied house. It was a beautiful house, I'm telling you. My mom loved that house so much. It was her childhood dream. Considering her background, she had come all the way from Bukoloto. It's in the village. Very humble. And they came to Kampala following the divorce of my grandmother, or the separation, whatever it was. She was young. So she faced up to all the challenges in her life and lived up to all her dreams. Yes. Had a family. By 22, 23, she had already had 4 of us. 81, last born. My brother, the late Michael Gwayambade, rest in peace. But by then, their attention was more on me. I was always the darling. And my dad always emphasized that this is my hair, and it really put me up to test. Fortunately, I was very bright. That always made him happy. Whenever at the end of term, school reports and everything and all that, you know, that is the dynamics of how things were going on and going about in life. But things begin to change in 86, 87, 88. So by 88, we are in Chevando. My dad takes ill. Suddenly, it was something that came from nowhere. And we noticed that when he started losing so much weight. Yeah. But we put that suspicion on one thing. In 85, they were rounded up, many of the billionaires were rounded up and taken to Kololo encampment. They must have been given something. Baba Wubutwa. Because they did everything. Dr. Salio wa Mariandina, Yaringa Ali Kutafena driver, our neighbor. They did everything. Medicine came from abroad, Thailand, South Africa, everything. He was in Mango Hospital. They built a private wing for him. There was a lot of fear. There was Chanda, one day, Chanda. There was... The battle was relentless. And that would explain why he discharges himself from the hospital and goes to Kitagobwa, where he was born, where he called home, Mzee Musisi. That was 1989. We left Chebando in 89 September. Somia was in school. No, when he discharges himself from hospital, then he goes to Kitagobwa. Then he would write 40 pages. Ebintu byembagamba tata wange yabiwandiika. Era baabisoma on his death when they were reading the will. He wrote a dossier, handwritten, exposing everything, how they didn't reveal to him that Musisi is not his father. Lots of things were written, and it sent shockwaves. My mom was young; she was just in her 30s, a widow, seeing all these things happening in her life. Very, very beautiful. My mom, and many of the people, we never saw them again. We never saw most of these people who came. I think they just wanted to come and see. And you know how people be. We were young. Zinani was senior 3. Nani was senior 3. Anyway, let's go back to my mom. So my mom would retire in 85, and before her retirement, she was gifted 2 buses. Nazibagamba is a steer. And that later would launch her into business in downtown Kampala, Central Business District. Yes. And then later she would launch. Mulaba kiosk sezo. Is a Coca-Cola. Zoaliza mama wange. Yali ndoza bilabide Kenya, because Kenya was much more ahead of Uganda at the time. So there was a proposal, and she had connections. My dad having been in bottling business, Pepsi and all that. So my dad sold the shares when he fell sick. He sold the shares in Pepsi. He sold the shares in Lake Victoria Hotel. Hotels, whatever. Subsidiaries, something like that. They try in a farm, kakile mixed farm, model farm. Kati Amos Sinze, he was a very good friend of our family, and I was instrumental in helping us manage the finances. Chaotic. Everything was chaotic. There was a lot of grabbing and all that. Ngina biba bulire ebyo nebyali wo. Tata wanga afudde. Ngenda kuba expose. Mutegere. Twali bana bato. Mama wange bamulangidde sijui yalina munaku bite. That was opportunistic. They were being opportunistic, you know what I mean? So they wanted us to leave the house. On the road. Mama angejizimbila. My dad had many properties. Chebando. Can you imagine? Those who remember Chebando, Wachanda, Katwalu Homes Darling. Awali wafe. Homes Darling boarding school. Kutakali affair on Narioneri. Wali wo farm. Twaine nyumba najja na nkumbi. Amayumba. Twaine ebintu bingi nnyo twaluzinga bingi nnyo, but that was kati tugenda kukola part 2. To exploring how my mom enters into business and how her acumen would send shockwaves in Kampala. Hey, mama yali successful nnyo. Abantu baayagala mama wange mu Kampala awo. Mwe. Mutabani wange paatu asomera Kenya. Jesus Christ, man. Nakomangawo okuva Kenya. N'andaga ebintu nenna byali akola. Mulaba exodus y'abaana abawala abaasooka okugenda e Dubai mu 90s. Abasinga mamange yabawalanga ssente. We lost a lot of money. Ezo tetwaddamu naziraba ezo. She used to lend money. She had a money lending business. Call it like not like a forex business or that. Yali mu bintu bingi nnyo. Let's take it like that. But I'm going to give you that story and whatever really was happening at the time. And that would explain why I'm in Tanzania and she wants me to come back. Yajja kwa Kamba, I was told, and wrote a letter, gave it to the bus drivers. But she looked very poorly. That was following a fall on the steps in old taxi park. Amadala gagakkirira ng'ova mu Kiyembe. Walingawo amadala gakyaliwo ndowooza. N'agwa ekigwo. And things never, and things never what? Went back to normal. It was a simple fall, but maybe a stroke. Probably it was a stroke. You get me? And they tried every sort of treatment in Zambia Franciscan Hospital. Umanye in Zambia Hospital, Kevina Ward, private wing. She was there because when I returned from Kenya, that's where she was. And I was shocked. It was a Saturday, I remember. Saturday, came back, went home, and the house was closed. And when I asked around, they said, she's in the hospital. And I knew the hospital. So I had to go there. And that's 1996. She was there, then she was discharged. Then I went back to Kenya. I went back to Nairobi to finish. I think I had exams to do. Yeah. Then I came back. Then I eventually realized that I think it's done. It's done. I have to return. I have to return back to what? To Uganda. And that's how I end up in Tanzania. I end up in Tanzania. Biwavu. My people. Tunyumye mbos. Kakati, that is the story as it is going to go. Abatamanya bino bintu kakati byonna byaliwo naye no mama wange obulwadde bwe yalwala tetwabutegeera nabo. You stroke ku 40 years old. But of course she was dealing with so much stress as well. The stress. But she was always happy. She was always a happy lady. Abantu bamwagala nnyo. She was a people's person. Ate mu 96 yali yeesimbyewo kuba women's MP Kawempe division. Yali ayingidde politics. Yes, Kawempe division otuli Kyebando. I remember yakola ebintu bingi nnyo ebyasasamaza abantu. Well, people, she was always an enigma, my mom. And that's when she took ill. 1996, the first elections after the 10 years. The first elections after the 10 years. And then she would give up the seat for Medi Kagwa. Medi was the secretary of Uganda Revenue Authority, and he was the one who recommended me to go there and work and do my placement. And akakoma okuve Kenya. So you see, a lot of things were happening. A lot of things were happening. Medi Kagwa. Then he worked as a human rights whatever. Human rights, Uganda. Hey, yari family, he was our neighbor to Mawanda Road. Yeah. So we are going to break it down. Break down the story. And then we get to the bottom of it. Then you understand what the Chanda family, the Chanda family. If you go back from the beginning of the video, because there's analogies nyingi nnyo. Mbanyonnyola ekintu kino. N'ebirala byonna bye mumanyolwedde byenjogeddeko back to back. You cannot break down everything in 40 minutes. It will be a very long thing. That's why I said I give it in series. Break it down, break it down, break. So when you see the pictures, there are many unseen pictures you haven't seen. Pictures of my mom you have not seen. She was very, very young.